In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being audio, video recorded. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. Please address all comments to the chair. This meeting of the Conservation Commission is being held by Zoom at the link provided with this notice. The Zoom number of this meeting is 792-737-0353. If you wish to speak, please use the, I gotta admit somebody here. Please use the raised hand feature, which I believe now for everyone, if you go to the bottom of the screen, there'll be a reactions panel. And if you click on the reactions panel, there's a raised hand feature.
It's working.
If you can't figure that out and you're using video, you can also sort of wave at the screen and someone will call it to my attention. I'm Bob Pease. I'm the chair. I'll take a roll call vote. Just a roll call. Rich Birsch.
Present.
Jeff Viviano.
Present.
Patty Adams. Patty is not yet with us. Katie Childs.
Present.
Mike LaRouche.
Present.
Jack Rabbit.
Present.
And that's it for members right now. Are there any announcements or comments from members of the commission?
Bob, Mr. Chairman, excuse me.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, basically Stormwater Committee is coming before the selectmen on next Tuesday. And we're gonna install 2 more members. One of them is John Beal. The other one is young Matt Proctor to join our team. We'll also give a quick update on where we are specific to complying with the MS4 requirements.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you, Bob.
Any other comments from commissioners? Are there any comments from members of the public? Seeing none, we'll move to minutes of previous meeting. I believe we passed the December 1st minutes at the last meeting. And so that brings us to January 5th. How about the 15th? I mean, how about the January? I think we passed all those minutes. Do we have the minutes from the 19th, Matt? I believe you sent those out again.
Yeah, I did.
I know I sent Matt some comments and he sent out a revised version that included my comments. I guess I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of January 19th.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
If there's no further discussion, roll call vote. Rich Birsch,
Aye.
Jeff Viviano,
Aye.
Patty Adams. Oh, Patty's not with us yet. Katie Childs,
Aye.
Mike LaRouche,
Aye.
Jack Rabbit,
Aye.
and I for myself. Do we have anyone here? Our first appointment is a request for a field change at 168 West Street. Do we have anyone here for that?
Yes, we're here.
I'm sorry.
Barbara and yep, Barbara and Michael Battle.
Okay. And Mike, do we have any?
Barbara, do you have anything on your computer you can share?
I do, or I can hold up. So,
Give me a second. I can.
I didn't have it preset, but basically, we were approved for an addition to our home on the side that falls within the
100 and 200.
the 100 and 200 foot markers. And with COVID and with all the other time that we had to review what we were doing, we decided to scale down our overall project. But in doing so, change the shape of it a little bit. And that puts us 10 feet.
A little more within the 100 foot, a
It's-
little less within the 200 foot, but it's still, everything that we're doing is still at the top of the hill. There's a hill that's probably a 15, 18 foot drop. We're only building up in that hill before it drops down to the lower driveway. And we're going from approximately 5.5% of total riverfront usage down to 4.6% of total riverfront usage, which is within that 100 and 200 foot line. Fine. If you want to wait a second, I can go to my computer and bring back the documents and plug them in here, and she can share them. Take me about 30 seconds.
Do you have them on your computer? Because if you have them on your computer, you can go down the bottom of the screen and share your screen. And you can call them up on the screen of your computer and then go down the bottom and share the screen. Because to be very honest with you, the commission is very reluctant to approve things without seeing documentation.
Right. So we did provide Matt with documentation with new drawing.
And I apologize.
Yeah, I'm
but
looking
those
for
are-
it now.
Say that again, Matt?
I'm looking for it now.
Yeah, we'll all look for it in a minute here. I
I
have,
can,
go ahead. Yeah.
I'll log in and I can just share.
Where's my?
Wasn't on the drive. Mr. Chairman, when did we receive these documents?
You'd have to ask Matt.
Hey, Matt?
It they were submitted on,
It was a couple of weeks ago, Jack.
Okay.
yeah.
I just didn't see it on the drive.
Barbara,
Yes.
would it be all right if we moved on to our second appointment, the LSIC annual report, and then come back to you, that which would give you an opportunity and it would
Yep.
give Matt an opportunity to take and see if you can, find these documents for the commission, so we might be able to, actually act on them tonight, because I can assure you we're not going to act on them tonight unless we have, unless the entire commission is able to see exactly what's being asked and what the changes are.
Yep. No problem.
Okay.
I assumed that because we had sent them to Matt, that he would have them available for everyone.
Yeah,
And I
it's my bad,
apologize.
Barbara.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead and move on and we'll come back to us.
All right, so if it's okay, I'd like to move on to the LSIC annual report presentation.
Barbara, can you resend them to me? I'm sorry, Bob.
Go ahead.
Barbara, can you
looking for-
re-email them to me, please?
Yes, I'm looking for them. Let me stop my voice here.
Okay,
Yep.
and so, thank you. All right, and so who's going to speak for LSIC? Is it going to be Wendy, Joanna, and Dominic?
Yeah, Wendy will present. Dominic will fill in if there's any questions for him, and I'm just going to be the bystander supporting the
All right,
team.
All right, Wendy, would you like to share your screen?
Sure. Thank you very much. For the folks, my name is Wendy Gendron. I own and operate Aquatic Restoration Consulting, and I am an independent consultant for the annual plant survey and preparing the annual report to talk about the Lake Shirley Lake Management program that they have a 5-year permit to conduct. So I did email Matt again. Hopefully he has the full report, and let me know if you have any issues, and I can try to resend it in a different format or a different structure if it's getting hung up because of its size. So as you know,
It's
a
on
lot
the
of,
phone.
great, thank you. So as you know, we are doing essentially the same program year after year unless we come to the commission and ask for change, and that it would always be dependent on the conditions that we're seeing out in the lake. So this past year, now again, we're talking about October 15th, 2020 through October 14th, 2021. Those are the range of the data that I'm presenting here this evening. LSIC is permitted for a 6-foot drawdown. Unfortunately, this last drawdown year, it was not achieved. We only achieved a maximum of 5 feet, but it really only averaged about 4.3 feet during the time of period where you would expect that freezing of the roots. Thankfully, there were no fish kills reported during the drawdown period, and they haven't had any in the history of the drawdowns. Refill was completed by April 24th. And I'll stop briefly at the end of each slide because it seems like maybe there was a delay in getting the report and you may not have, this might be the first time you're seeing these data. So please feel free to interrupt me at any time. So as part of the permit, the LSIC volunteers, as well as Dominic from Solitude and myself, do some monitoring. The LSIC volunteers, they monitored Secchi disc transparency. This is a measurement where you're looking at the water clarity. And on this graphic, you can see the data for this past year. It was pretty consistent with prior years. Thankfully, we did not have a reduction in water clarity below 5 feet. The 5-foot threshold is the threshold in which we kind of stop and reevaluate what's going on in the lake. If the clarity is less than 5 feet, we start collecting algae samples to see if there's a bloom form. And if there's a bloom forming, we get recommendations from a phycologist to determine whether we should proceed with an algal treatment, which consists of copper. Thankfully, this year we did not have those conditions, although you'll see that the LSIC still went ahead and did some phytoplankton or algae monitoring, but our clarity stayed pretty good throughout the year. The volunteers also monitor temperature and dissolved oxygen. I won't go into how to interpret these graphs because I'm hopeful by this time you understand the X and Y coordinates, but if you don't, I would be more than happy to stop and explain it. But essentially in the temperature range, you know, it stayed pretty warm throughout the lake from top to bottom. And oxygen was ample through right down to about 7 feet. And then at one time during the year, it really dropped. At one location, it really dropped below the 5 milligrams per liter threshold. The 5 milligrams per liter threshold is a fisheries and a water quality standard threshold that we generally like to use to determine whether the water body is meeting its designated use for fish and wildlife habitat for a warm water class B fishery. So we're not really concerned so much when the oxygen drops down really low near the bottom. This is a typical thing that happens in just about all lakes. What's going on at the bottom is in the sediment, there's decomposition, and that process of breaking down plant material and other organic particles consumes oxygen, and usually there's no plants at that depth to replace the oxygen. So that's why you get a deprivation of oxygen. And thankfully, it did not go to a level where it was what we call anoxic or completely void of oxygen. So while it's below the 5 milligrams per liter, you still had oxygen at the bottom. I'll pause for questions. We also do some water quality monitoring in terms of nutrients, as well as pH and conductivity. There was really nothing remarkable to present this past year about this. The pH ranged within the normal change of about 6.9, 7 being neutral, and 8.1 is a little bit of basic, meaning that's a little bit lower in hydrogen ion concentration. And what it does indicate is lakes that have higher pHs generally are very productive, meaning they have a lot of primary productivity going on. In other words, they have a lot of algae and plant growth stimulating and changing the pH of the water. This is not alarming, but it just shows you that there's that fluctuation over the season as well as during the day. Conductivity values remained around 250 microsiemens per centimeters, and they're typical of a productive lake in the New England area. So there's nothing alarming. Those conductivity values are pretty consistent between years and throughout the season. So what we look for is spikes. in that. And what would spike that up is maybe some road salt, some excessive salts going into the lake. We didn't see anything of concern in terms of conductivity. Turbidity was low. It remained below 3 NTUs, which is just the Nepolithic turbidity units. And that's just a measure, that's just the units that they subscribe to that parameter. And generally speaking, anything under 10 is acceptable for recreation and fisheries management. Nitrogen was low to moderate. That's a good thing. Phosphorus, as you've heard me explain on multiple occasions, that it's the limiting nutrient, and it therefore is directly influences algal growth. So the process is, if you can control phosphorus, often you can control algal growth. In the lake, thankfully, phosphorus was very low this past year. It was 10 micrograms per liter or 0.01 milligrams per liter. We usually use a threshold of 0.025 or 25 micrograms per liter as the threshold where we start to be concerned about phosphorus that would be enough to fuel an algal bloom.
Wendy, can I ask you, can you explain why you measure conductivity and what it's an indicator of?
Sure. Conductivity is a measure of dissolved salts in the water, so ions. We all think of a conductivity in terms of electricity, right? So how conductive is the water? How much electricity can a substance allow it to go through? And so high conductivity means it's got a lot of salts, and salts enable electricity to go through. It doesn't mean that the water is electric or anything like that. It's just a measure of the dissolved salts. So we're talking about ions like sodium, potassium, both positive and negative ions. And again, we measure that when a water body such as a natural lake, such as Lake Shirley, when it receives a lot of conductivity, or it has a lot of conductivity, it means there's likely a lot of runoff from non-natural sources. So when you get values above 250, sometimes you want to investigate a little bit more to see if there's a source for all of that conductivity. Could be septic systems, it could be road runoff. The spring, you would expect a lot of high conductivity due to road runoff after salting and sanding for the winter months.
Thank you.
Okay. As I mentioned, while not required, the LSIC did some phytoplankton monitoring. This graphic shows the phytoplankton biomass from 2015 all the way through August of 2021. What you want to watch here is these are just the different families of algae. So you have blue-green algae, which is really cyanobacteria. You've got green algae, you have red algae, you have diatoms, you have all these different groups. And the ones that we're always concerned with is the cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. And why do we care about those? Is because those algae are the ones that are capable of producing toxins that can cause health and health concerns for humans, pets, and the environment if they get excessive density. So we're really watching this blue bar. You can see that in 2015, we had a lot of cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, and then we hadn't had some for some time. In 2020, we had a few more than we had in the past, but those numbers dropped down again in 2021. So it's good news, and it's probably related to the lower phosphorus values that we're seeing in the most recent years versus what we saw back in 2015. So now I'm going to turn it over a little bit to Dominic, and he can talk about the treatment, what we targeted, where we treated, and what the results were for that activity.
Hi, good evening, folks. Good to see you all. So again, my name is Dominic Maringolo. I'm with Solitude Lake Management. We're part of the Lake Shirley management team. We do the in-lake management activities like treatments. Fortunately, we didn't have to do algae treatment, as Wendy just explained, so it was a good year in terms of that. We did go out on June 16th to do the early season survey to determine the presence of any non-native species or problematic species. And we presented that report, pre-treatment report, to the commission on, I believe, July 21st. So basically, we looked for areas where there was curly leaf pondweed, fanwort. We did not find any of the non-native milfoils, Eurasian or variable milfoil. We haven't seen those in a number of years. And we also look for areas of dense growth of native species, so potentially problematic areas as defined in the management plan as being a greater than 50% cover of the bottom of the lake and greater than 50% height in the water column. So those areas were also subject to treatment. So we did adjust the treatment areas to some extent in conjunction with Wendy and the LSIC to trying to promote some areas of more diverse native plants, like Robbins pondweed, for instance. So we did some adjustments there and basically came up with the treatment area map. So we did about 62 acres of the lake this year. We treated areas of curly-leaf pondweed with the diquat herbicide. We treated areas of problematic pondweeds, which were, if you remember from last year, we had a very large bloom of the native pondweeds, which we had not seen in some time. That was very surprising to everybody. We did see some of those pondweeds again this year, and also higher than normal amounts, but not quite as bad as last year. So we did target some of those as well, some areas of topped out tape grass. And also we selected a couple areas of the lake which are marked in yellow on the slide there to try some additional areas of fanwort control using the flumioxazin herbicide. So if you remember last year, we did a cove, the north part of the lake next to the right of that yellow circle last year, which worked very well to control the fanwort. So we included these two additional areas this year for that treatment. So again, in all, we treated 62 acres of the lake. You'll see in the report, we have the amounts of the herbicides, a map of the tracks of the treatment vessel, the site conditions in terms of weather, temperature, dissolved oxygen on that day as required in the order of conditions. So the treatment went very well. Everything was notified, posted ahead of time. We did a kind of a cursory post-treatment inspection on August 24th, found excellent control of the fanwort in the two areas that were treated, really good control of the pondweed species that had been problematic, and saw a good beneficial reduction in those areas of tape grass that we treated, but also again saw some tape grass in those areas in the treatment area and outside of the treatment areas, a good distribution of other native species. So I think overall the treatment, it was a success again this year. I'm sure Wendy will go into her post-treatment inspection, which was done later in the summer in September. And basically we'll recommend the same things, and I think we'll maybe get into that later. If not, I can pick up right at the end and talk a little bit about that. So if there's any questions about this section, feel free to ask, and then we'll turn it back over to Wendy.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, through you.
Go ahead.
First of all, you get scruffy on us.
Yeah, well, I've had this for about a year. I just can't seem to get myself to shave it off. So.
Oh, don't do it. It's too cold. Hey, vegetation density. How does that look in comparison to past years? And I'm wondering if the reason why you're not having any more, your phosphorus loads are staying low is because perhaps you have more vegetation consuming the phosphorus and not allowing the algae to take off? Is that, is
I
it?
think there's some truth to that. I think Wendy has some good comparisons.
Okay, I'm
And in
sorry.
the report too about how the overall density of some of these plants have changed. I think we can hold off until that discussion comes up. But
Yeah.
I think you make some good points, Jeff.
There's some potential learning there. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. And Wendy, I look forward to your part.
Great, Jack. I'll just answer one of your questions though about the water column phosphorus. So there's only a few plants out there that take phosphorus out of the water column. I'm talking about rooted plants. The rest of the rooted plants we see in the lake really are getting their nutrients from the sediment. So, but what would take nutrients out of the water column is that's what we measure as the water column. There's a few of those rooted plants, or even the ones like demersum, coontail. Some of those plants will take, but they're very few in number. But algae will take phosphorus out of the water column.
Right.
So it could be, last year I would have said if we had a good year, I would say because there was very little storm water, right? So you have very little inputs. So you're not getting a lot of inputs to the lake. I would have claimed that. But this past year we had a pretty wet winter, late summer. So maybe it's a flushing component to it. So
Sure.
stuff that have accumulated over the summer or the past years gets flushed out with a lot of water. So as long as that water that's coming in is clean, it really impacts the water quality of the lake itself. So hopefully that answers a little bit of your question about phosphorus.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for the information. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy.
So what I do at the end of the season is one of the concerns was, are these treatments over the years really impacting the lake? And are they changing the habitat quality for aquatic biota in a negative way? And so I am hired as an independent consultant, not really related to DOM, although we do communicate, but I perform an independent survey at the end of the plant season so that we can see what's going on. And I compare those data with historic data. So we sample the same points year after year. It's the 66 observation points that I think were even started by Geosyntec way back when. And of those 66 sample points, we encountered, or we saw, wild celery or tape grass, is two different names depending on the observer, at 65% of the sites. And we saw fanwort at 60% of the sites. And we saw European naiad at 47% of the sites. So those were the three most abundant species in the lake. And while Dom's explanation that the treatment was successful, it was successful in those areas in which they treated. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was successful for the entire lake. And that's still why you see substantial fanwort within the lake, as well as tape grass. We're talking about what I call the conservation species. These are the two plants that Dominic mentioned. They're native plants that when I did the 10-year plus analysis, it appeared that those two plants had declined over time. So there was a thought that perhaps we don't treat those areas where we observe those plants in the early season and hope that they recover. There's some nuances to this. It's not an obvious cause and effect of the drawdown or the herbicide treatment, because what can happen is other plants can come into those areas and it could be a competition between plants. So if fanwort comes in and it outcompetes Ceratophyllum or coontail or Robin's pondweed, it has nothing really to do with the treatment or the drawdown. It's just that fanwort is so aggressive that it outcompetes it. But we're doing what we can to try to encourage regrowth of those two conservation species. So neither of those conservation species were present at the untreated sites in September, but Robin's pondweed was presented at the locations and dominated the community when it was present. So that's good news. The fanwort, again, deemed successful with good post-treatment control at the treatment sites, but those treatment sites were very limited to those yellow areas you saw in the prior figure. So now looking at this graph that hopefully you've learned to love. This is the average annual cover and biovolume. So cover is essentially when you're looking at the water and you're looking down, how much of the area that you're observing is covered with plants. So we rank this on a 0 to 4 scale, 0 being there's no plants in the area we're looking at. A 1 would be between 1 and 25% of that area we're looking at has plants. And then a 2 being 26 to 50% and so on and so forth, to a 4, which would be 75 to 100%. So you can see in this graphic, the blue line is the cover. So you can see cover was about, we're going to say about 50% back in 2003. There was a really big decline by 2009. And then it's kind of gone up and down. And so now you're seeing some variability. What I would say is cover was essentially comparable to 2020, but less than what's went on in 2019. So then we look at biovolume, and biovolume is considering the entire water column of the plant, of the observation surface. So now you're looking what percent of that column of water is occupied by plants. So you can have high cover, meaning there's a lot of plants, but you can have low biovolume. And what that would tell us is that there's only a little bit of it at the bottom and the rest of the water column is void of plants. So biovolume is also a very important indicator, because even though you have high cover, it's going to want to cover the bottom, because if there's light reaching the sediment, some plant will generally grow. You don't want the plants to go all the way and top out at the surface, because that really restricts open water flow for circulation, for fish, for grazing and whatnot. So you're looking to maintain a lower biovolume than you are a cover. So we rank that on a similar scale, where a 2 would be about 50% biovolume. So if you think of a 4-foot column of water, you probably have plants up to 2 feet, and the remaining 2 feet is void of plants. So that's kind of what we're talking about when you're looking at biovolume. And biovolume is shown here in orange, and it follows a similar trend as cover did in the past. And this red line here, this dashed line, just as an indicator of when the association has started doing herbicide treatments. So they never had any herbicide treatments prior to 2007. So that just kind of gives you a mark on the wall for that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Wendy, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, you go back. Okay, you got a decent correlation between your cover and your biovolume. In the last 2 periods, they both took a little bit of a dip. Any idea why? Is it water sloshing through, or what? Why would that? And basically your biovolume looks like it was a little steeper decline.
Right. So what these data don't tell us, they don't tell us what portion of all these sample sites were within the drawdown zone and outside the drawdown zone. What portions of the site were treated with herbicide and what weren't not. So it's kind of an overall assessment of the lake. So it's very hard for me to say right now what might have caused that decline. But I would say that it's relatively good news, because what the studies say is that anything over 50%, in fact, anything over about 35 to 40% cover starts reducing the fishery habitat. And that's because the fish, as I mentioned before, they can't maneuver as well in the water body, and it kind of stunts growth. So if you really want to stay below, this 2.5 to 2, oops, sorry, my thing keeps advancing on me. That's kind of like the target. And that's why Dominic and Solitude target 50% or more when it comes to picking out their treatment zones. So we could interpret this a different way. We could say, okay, maybe the treatment plants and the treatment and the drawdowns are working. But why is that different from 2019? I'm not really sure. We've had some wacko weather years. 2020 was a drought, and 2021 was a wet year. Mm-hmm. You know, and the environment that we have no control over is a big part of the story, and it's really hard to parse the data out.
So in prior years, if I recall, they were actually able to achieve some, it was a 9-foot drawdown at one point, and later on they were getting 6s. So we only got 4.5. I'm wondering what the effect of the drawdown or how effective it really is. But again, this weather, it's freezing. We're going to have a great drawdown this year.
Yeah. What I can tell you from my experience on other lakes, I've been watching Bear Hill Pond for the last, almost 20 years, and they do a drawdown. And what I can tell you is the drawdown doesn't necessarily change your overall plant cover. What it does do, it changes the plants that actually grow within that drawdown zone. So you're seeing a shift from, they had a huge fanwort problem, and it went right up almost to, the shoreline, the edge of the water. And what they found is you can't find fanwort anymore in that drawdown zone. It really just doesn't exist. But what is there are other plants, and there are other plants, there might be seed producers or other things that don't get affected by drawdown. So they produce their seeds. They don't care that the seeds get frozen because they'll stay viable in the sediment for years. And that's what we were thinking what happened the last time when Dominic went out there and saw that native pondweed. That native pondweed is a big seed producer. So it might have stimulated some germination of a seed bed that's been in there for quite some time. So drawdown won't control your cover, but it certainly will do something to your biomass and change the species within that zone.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So now we're looking at richness. So one of the items that we're, as biologists, always talking about is diversity and richness. Richness is the number of different species that are present. And so what I have on here, I just want you to focus on the blue bars because we've removed the targeted species. In other words, we're not paying attention to the species we actually want to control because control is a good thing in this regard. So if you look at the blue bars, you can see in 2002, we had about 22 species, different species identified at those 66 plant observation locations. And it varied over time. And then we saw a big decline around 2015, 16 and 17, but it's starting to climb back up. And so now in this past year, I didn't write it down, but I think it's like 17 or 18 species we saw in 2021. What I did see for the richness difference, and the bar at the bottom just shows the change over the prior year. So in this case, you're looking at the dark red for the targeted species removed. So from 2002 to 2003, we lost 9 different, I say lost, it's really not lost. It's 9 different species weren't identified at the sample locations. They're probably still in the lake somewhere. They're just not at our sample locations. Because again, we're only surveying 66 points out of, how many acres of the lake. And we're only looking at, I don't know, like 3 square meters at a time. So you didn't see 9 species, but then you picked up 2, then you picked up 4. And so you can see some variability. We picked up 3 in 2021 over 2020. And the 3 different species that we identified at the survey locations was blue-green algae, and I'll explain that in a minute, grassy pondweed, and water marigold. Grassy pondweed and water marigold, we know have been in the lake historically, but they're now showing up in one of our points. So it's not that they were ever lost. It's just now they're showing up in our points where they had been missing for a while. Now I wanted to come back to blue-green algae because what I'm talking about is not the algae that's mixed into the water column. I'm seeing, because when I survey, I use both a rake and a camera. And so with the camera, I can see algal mats that are just sitting on the sediment. And so I'm recording those data. So it looks like I picked up an extra species, but the samplers of prior years may not have used a camera or may have not bothered to mark down blue-green algal mats. I just tend to do that. So that's why I said when we first took this task on a couple of years ago, that there is variability within samplers that you have to factor into these data. And that's a good example of one of them.
Wendy, Mr. Chairman, if I could say, Wendy,
Go ahead, Jack.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Wendy, I would call this if you look at 2017, by the way, you're allowed to change the trend lines if you find an assignable cause. And in this particular case, I would suspect that, having been on this Conservation Commission, there was some pretty radical changes thereabouts in 2016, 2017. I would change your trend line. I'd break it in half and say, you know what, you're going back up in the right direction. And your trends are supporting that. So yeah, I would I think this is a success. Something has changed. Something has changed in this series of events. So yeah, that's an assignable cause, and I bet you the cause is the fact that we're getting more conservative in what we're.
And if you go back to this graph, notice that it's those same years,
Yeah.
Jack. And
Yeah,
you're seeing a difference. And look what happened. In 2015, there was a severe algal bloom that kind of
yeah,
choked off the sunlight from all the rooted plants for quite some time. So
And this-
maybe that is the tipping point.
that could have been in the regrowth. But yeah, this looks good. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm jumping. I'm sorry.
So I'm not going to go into this because there's a lot to explain. I think I describe it pretty well in the report for you to understand it, but this is diversity and evenness. So this takes into account that, so say on this you had 20 different species, but if fanwort was primarily, 90% of the species that you encountered, you're going to get a very low diversity and evenness index because it's just dominated by one particular species. So this kind of balances out this
Yeah.
graphic to ensure that of the species you're seeing, they're evenly distributed. So you have just as many pondweeds as you have other different water lilies, and that number of species is more evenly distributed among the entire population.
Right.
Again, I could spend about an hour on this one graphic, so I'll let you read that in the report. Now, getting to the data point that I was telling you earlier, that I also like to look at the individual species and what happens over time, because things like drawdown, while it may not show up in the cover data, you'll see it potentially in the biovolume data, and you'll see it in the individual species, what happens to those species over time. And this is kind of the graphic that got us thinking of, geez, maybe we need to try to look at Robbins pondweed and coontail a little bit closer and see if we can bring them back. So my 10-year analysis or whatever, there's more data in that report, but I'm showing the last 10 years, just the fall surveys in this case. So if we look back over here in September 21 versus September 20, and you look at the species list here, we haven't seen Eurasian and variable milfoil since 2011, 2012. So this is good news, right? If we look at fanwort, we saw a lot of it in September 19, and then we reduced it quite a bit. And I'd say 33 versus 37, this is the number of sites that we observed the plant.
Mm.
So that's 37 sites out of 66 had fanwort. And so you can just look. Wild celery is the other one we're trying to control because it's very abundant and can get aggressive even though it's a native plant. So you can look at all of these data and see what's happening over time for the different plant biomass. Again, this table goes on for quite some time. It's very lengthy, and you can find that in the report. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have after this meeting as you start going through that report and you want my opinion on a couple of the data assumptions.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just quickly, because see, you get me talking and then I can't shut up.
Don't stop. Don't stop.
If you look at Robinsii, so this is one of the conservation species. See, we've only seen it at one of the 66 locations for some time, and then we didn't see it in this year, and then we saw it twice, and then we saw it once. So it's very rare. But if you look back at over the years, back when they first started this in 2003, doing the samples, it was a lot more abundant. And so this is why we're trying to not treat areas. Supposedly, Robinsii is not as reactive to herbicides as some other plants, and it's pretty resistant. So I'm not convinced that it's necessarily the herbicides that's knocking this down. It may actually be competition with plants like fanwort that has moved into its area. So I'll just quickly go over as part of, LSIC's general outreach. They're always looking to educate the folks around the lake. They're very active with the campground there to ensure that they're mentioning cleaning your boats, cleaning your tackle, cleaning all that to not introduce new species. I think not this past year, but the year prior to COVID, we were engaging the town and potentially going for a grant to do some stormwater work. We're still actively trying to pursue different things like that. past couple of years with COVID has really knocked our abilities down to chase a lot of stuff. But Joanna can give you some more information on the activities that they've been doing. Again, it's in the report. So what do we want to do in 21, 22? We're again going to try to do a 6-foot drawdown. We're going to continue doing the water quality monitoring. Dom had mentioned the herbicide treatment, and I'll let him talk a little bit about that. The bottom bullet is really for the town of Shirley. They only issued the LSIC a 3-year permit, so we're going to be requesting an extension this year. I'm hopeful that we can get it extended, because if both towns are on different schedules, it makes it very expensive to do 2 NOIs over and over and over. So we're trying to politely see if we can get them to do an extension and get on the same schedule. But they did make a note at our last meeting that they don't typically issue a 5-year permit. So it may be a lost battle, but we're going to give it a try. Dom, do you want to say anything about the herbicide treatment this year?
Yeah, just really quickly. I mean, we're going to have basically the same plan. So, you know, we'll go out and do an early season survey to see if we have a lot of curly leaf pondweed, which has happened periodically in the past, but the last few years we have not seen a lot of early growth of that plant. So then we will move on to the June survey, which is really the basis of forming our treatment recommendations, looking for again, any non-native species, any overabundant native species, which will do the survey, prepare the plan, and bring it in front of the commission for approval, and likely treat sometime in July. We would like to look for another area of fanwort to try the flumioxazin herbicide on. It has worked pretty well the last couple of years. And, you know, based on the algae monitoring, Secchi disc readings and algae counts, we're always prepared to do a copper sulfate algicide treatment if needed. So basically the same program, and we'll continue to communicate with the commission about that. That's it.
All right, members of the commission that have additional questions. Rich Birsch.
Thank you, Bob. Great presentation, Wendy. Lots of information here to digest. I did just have a request on the areas that we are doing the fanwort control. If we can perhaps just have a call out when you do the survey on how the fanwort is being controlled in the successive years. So we have some information to go on as we continue on with that program. And I thought we were targeting April 1st for the refill of the lake. I noticed it was April 24th.
Yes, both very good comments. Thank you. Yeah, I will call out the areas and the specific points in the success or data, how well we controlled fanwort by September. You know, Dom and his crew goes out there some point shortly after the treatment, and my survey is a little bit later. So it would be interesting to take a look at those separately. Thank you for that. And you're absolutely right about the drawdown. The refill is supposed to be by permit April 1st. And I did talk with Joanna and the gentleman that operates the dam, and his reply was, and I'm reading into his reply because it wasn't very direct, but it sounded like there was ice still on the lake in April. And in his practice and what he's been told in the past was he's not to close the gates if there's still ice on the pond, on the lake. So that's what I think has happened. Again, that's the sort of the answer that I got. I don't know if Joanna wants to add to that, but yeah, it was a 24-day delay in refill than what the permit had suggested. So I've cautioned them to start closing the gates sooner. Obviously, there was something about ice being on the lake, and it might be a dam safety issue. So I'll leave it at that unless Joanna wants to add.
No, because I was on that same email thread. So, and we both recapped to make sure April 1st is the date, and if not, track each day why.
Anything else, Richard?
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Jack, you have something else?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Joanna, stormwater in terms of affecting your lake. Hey, is there a chance that we could gab with you? Because we're always looking for a adjunct member that might participate with us as we do our planning. So just throwing that out to you.
You want me to be a member?
I would love to have you as a member. Well, I can't get you a member just yet unless we go to the selectmen again, but you can have my vote. How's that? Just come and join us and participate. How's that? If you can.
Yeah, I can do that, or I could, and I will bring it to the board meeting on the next Wednesday to see if there's someone else that's interested as well.
Yeah, we need
We're downhill and it all comes to us.
us too. And we're getting beaten to death right now. Okay. Good stuff. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. Speaking for myself, tonight is the first night I've seen the report. You know, I'm going to read it closely after this, and I'm happy that Wendy has offered, you know, to answer any questions we may have after the meeting. So thank you, Wendy.
Anytime. Thank you for letting me present. I hope you have a great evening.
All
They're
right.
two great
Good
people
work,
to work with. We're lucky to have Dominic and Wendy. They're phenomenal people.
And Joanna
you.
too.
Think so.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Let's go back to 168 West Street. Right now, the paperwork for 168 West Street is now in our folder, our cloud folder. I don't know, Barbara, if you want to share it or if you want me to share it.
Well, if I share, I can share the new and I can share the original as well. So it's up to you.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Click on that.
This one, right?
Yeah.
I can't see what you're seeing, I don't think.
Right there.
Well,
Can you see
we are seeing a screen that says revised 1/12/2022.
Okay.
So click on.
Okay, so this is the new proposal, and can you see my cursor moving around?
Yes.
This is the area that we're talking about right here. I'm going to click back to the old one.
Yeah, you got it.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So in the old one, you can see that there was an addition here at the back of the house, and an addition here on the side, but it's a little bit smaller, right? So in the new plan, there is no longer any addition on the back of the house there, but this side one got a little bit bigger. We had a lot of difficulty locating stairs in an appropriate place, and we, as well as we wanted to scale down, right? We wanted to make our footprint smaller. So this is what we came up with. And Michael can share with you, if you scroll down here, I'll scroll. It's sideways because otherwise I couldn't show you the drawing, but the old numbers, the original numbers are here, right? And then the new numbers are here with the, is that the overall?
Yeah, yeah.
So the overall impact went down from 5.1% to 4.6%.
And this was submitted also to.
And right, well, it's all in the same document, so Matt has this as well. And our original,
That's just the new last revised.
Are there any comments or questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, do we have any DEP comments yet?
This is not an NOI. This is a field change.
Oh, okay.
So there wouldn't be any DEP comments. We approved this. We previously approved this, and they're asking for this change where they eliminate, some of the house in the back, and they've made some changes to the house on the side.
all right, we widened the side just a little bit, but basically took everything off the back. Or almost everything. And nothing changed down here between the berm, which will be composed of the soils that are taken out from this excavation. Nothing changed, in this back area here. We just widened this a little bit so it comes about 10 or 12 feet into the area a little further, but we totally reduced the impact of the footprint on the back of the house.
And that dash line represents the top.
Any questions,
And-
Jack?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Are there any comments or questions from members of the public? I'd be happy to entertain a motion about this request for a field change.
Hey, Bob, I'd make a motion that we accept the field change.
Thank you. Do we have a second for Jeff's motion?
Second.
We have a second. Unless there's further discussion, we'll have a roll call vote. Rich Birsch,
Aye.
Jeff Viviano,
Aye.
Katie Childs,
Aye.
Mike LaRouche,
Aye.
Jack Rabbit,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for your patience.
No problem. Thank you. The discussion about the lake was actually interesting, so no problem. Thank you guys so much.
The lake
All
wasn't.
righty,
At Lake Truly. And I'll stop sharing now.
all right. Our first public hearing, the Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on a request for determination by Marcia Beers for grading to accommodate a septic system within a 100-foot buffer zone at 205 Sunset Lane. Do we have someone here to represent Marcia Beers? Dan Wolf.
Good evening. And I do see Marcia is on here as well. As you introduced, we have filed an RDA for some work within the outer limits of the 100-foot buffer zone. The septic system for the new house is being placed down at the lower reaches of the property.
Dan,
Yes.
do you have a plan you can share with us?
Again, like the last applicant, I thought Matt typically displays.
Okay, and so, well, then this means I'll have to do it. As you can tell, I just love sharing my screen, so.
Believe it or
All right.
not, since COVID started, I've never shared, so I don't know how to do that.
Oh, it's very easy. So this
Is it?
is 205 Sunset. And is it the PDF, Matt? Let's see.
Yes.
Aha, I think I found it. Let's share this screen. And let's blow this sucker up.
There we go.
So here's Robs Hill Road.
And
So where are the wetlands here?
if you scroll down just a little bit more, you will see
Oh.
the wetland flags and the text that says Lake Shirley. There you go.
Oh, so they're on the other side of Sunset Lane from this lot.
Correct, right.
It's all becoming clear. All right, take us through.
All right, so the septic system is in the lower reaches of the property. As you see there, there's two leaching trenches that are being built, and the breakout slope extends over the 100-foot buffer zone line by about 14, 15 feet. And so that fill is going to be put in place, and then it will be loamed and seeded and secured. We've informed the landowner that certainly some low shrubbery can be planted on that slope if desired. But we don't want any woody trees or anything to be replanted there. So that will take place. And what also should be shown on this plan, which I just noticed just prior to the meeting, is we will want to gain access from Sunset Lane to bring materials in for the construction of that system. And you can see there's a utility pole labeled just downhill of the septic system. And it's pole number 14, and access is right there where you're circling. Yes, just to the left of that is a very flat area that has very limited tree growth. So there may be a tree or two that just needs to be opened up to allow trucks passage into there to bring the materials in for the system. But that's the extent of it. The area of the fill itself for the septic system comprises about 790 square feet. And the toe of the fill, which is where our erosion control is 85 feet from the wetland area. And as I mentioned, that access route that we'd like to take advantage of will also be surrounded by erosion control measures.
And I would say that we will probably, if it gets approved, we will condition the approval by, we're going to want to see a plan showing where the erosion control measures are going to be.
For that access road, yes.
Yep. Any comments or questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
Jack Rabbit.
Okay, thank you, sir. Hey, just a quick note to, I'm looking at the DEP report, and that's not for the property that's related to this.
There wouldn't be a DEP report for this, Jack. It's an RDA.
Right, I'm just pulling it off our drive and I clicked on it and said, wait a second, this is the wrong place.
Jack, it's in the wrong directory. That's all.
Right, okay, I just wanted to make people clear if they're scratching.
Hey, Jack, it's still showing up on your folder, but I moved that one into the appropriate folder. So if you refresh, it should show.
Bless your heart. Thank you. Sorry about that. I just didn't know if I was the only one that was confused at first. Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No other questions.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Any comments or questions from members of the public? I'm looking for a motion for a negative determination with the condition that the final plan show erosion control around the access road. And any other conditions that people may want to add.
I'll make a motion that we issue a -3 determination with the condition that we receive an updated plan showing the erosion protection around the construction entrance off of Sunset Lane, as well as a grading plan and a revegetation plan for that construction area prior to the issuing of the determination.
That sounds like an excellent motion to me. Do we have a second?
I'll second that one.
All right. If there is no further discussion, we'll have a roll call vote. Rich Birch?
Aye.
Jeff Viviano?
Aye.
Katie Childs?
Aye.
Mike LaRouche?
Aye.
Jack Rabbit?
Aye.
And I for myself.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Dan.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
The Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on a notice of intent by the town of Lunenburg for removal of an old dump site in municipal conservation land. Well, it's municipal land. It's not in municipal land next to bordering vegetated wetlands along the Catacoonamug Brook at 104 Fairview Road. Who is here for this application? Heather, who's representing the town?
So Mark Popham is our environmental consultant. I don't see him on the call right now.
I don't see him either. I'm assuming you would want him to be present.
I would. I can answer general questions, but he was the one that prepared the NOI materials and plan.
Matt, have you had any communication from Mr. Popham?
Yeah, I did. Excuse me. I did review the filing with him. I don't know where he is. I could try sending him an email really quick.
We could do that.
Actually, I think I have his number here on my phone. I could try to call him too.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself here.
Let's see.
So if you have general questions, I can answer those.
Well, first we always go through the plan and look at it and stuff like that, you know, so people can generate the questions. So let's see. This is Fairview. And we've got about,
Yeah, Bob's going directly to voicemail.
Matt, what's your suggestion here? I mean,
I'm sending him a text message right now.
You know, I'm looking, there's about 18 files in this, in between the two folders, between the folder and the subfolder. Usually there's a PDF that contains the plan, and I'm not seeing any PDFs.
The map of,
Yeah.
that was an attachment to the NOI, so. Yeah.
Should be there, Bob. I put him up.
Okay, I got an NOI signature page. I got and it would be a PDF, Matt?
Yeah, it should be. Looking at the DEP comments.
Because there's only one PDF in the whole play that I can find, and it's the NOI signature page, and it's just the one page.
Yeah, it's a JPEG, Bob.
It's a JPEG?
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, I think it said 104 Fairview Road, NOI site plan.
NOI site. Aha, look at that.
Is Bob be able to share it on the screen or?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Let's see if I can rotate this. So this is a map of the site. The site's at the top of a steep hill. The Catacoonamug Brook is at the bottom of the hill. Most of the debris is near the top, although some is rolled down to the bottom of the hill. And is this the only map we have?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions from commissioners or information that they'd like that isn't? To be honest with you, I have not looked at all these different files. Richard Bursch.
What is the material we're removing? What does
It's,
the debris consist of?
It's, well, from the site visit that I did, it was a lot of metal and, basically, I think someone who lived on the farm nearby used it as their dump for a number of years. There's cans and maybe, I remember most, mostly metal and stuff, but I don't, it's been a long time since that site visit. And I shouldn't be testifying here.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
So it's identified in the narrative of the NOI that it's appliances, boiler components, storage units, ductwork, pipe, sheet metal, fencing, empty containers, drums, plastic items, whole tires, including tire wheels, roofing and building materials. So this was, an old farm that the town purchased. So these materials identified, the environmental consultant who did wrote up the NOI and did the inspection, identified these materials in the time frame of 1950s to 1970s that were probably dumped during that time period when the previous owners owned that property.
Thank you, Heather.
That would make sense seeing what I saw on the property.
Something more, Rich?
No, I was just looking for it because I was reading the narrative, but the narrative, I didn't see any of that description in there, but.
It's under WPA Form 3, first paragraph at the end.
WPA Form 3, this is going from here. All right, let me.
Says B2 Inland Resource Impacts Narrative.
Okay. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
The second question I had, Bob, looking at the plan, I didn't see any erosion protection. And the only other thing I might recommend, where it's a 50-foot drop over a 100-foot run, they may want to put some diagonal deflection erosion protection to try to stop the water that accumulates from the top to the bottom and shut that off a little bit.
And Rich, the DEP commented on the lack of erosion protection, and
Okay.
Mr. Popham responded that it was his recommendation that after that the approval be conditioned, that after they've chosen the contractor, who will actually do the removal, that the siting of the erosion protection be discussed with the contractor, and approved, by the commission or our administrator, at that time, rather than doing it now before the contractor's chosen and everything. If you go there, it's not going to be easy to remove this stuff. It's a very steep slope, and to be honest with you, it's a mystery to me how they're going to accomplish it. So
Thank you, Bob.
Jack, anything else, Rich?
Nope, that's it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Jack Rabbit.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, it was a mess and it's real steep. I'm going to be really interested to see how they avoid taking those trees out because it was pretty populated. My concern was that it looks like a lot of the debris was actually in the water or right at the water's edge, Bob. And I'm thinking that we need to do some downstream protection, whether to put some veins in there to slow it down and put some sort of a settling pond a little bit further down to capture this material. It's going to be quite a challenge to keep that from working its way down to the brook while you're returning it. So I think we need to be thinking in terms of downstream and all sorts of stormwater potential here in terms of, you're going to get a big storm. How are you going to handle that? And then you're going to see some sort of a long-term erosion. This is a big piece. It's a good puzzle.
Anything else, Jack?
No, that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'm gonna get my hand up.
Can I
Jack, before you go, say, I'm sorry, Heather. Jack, my comment on that, if you recall from the site visit, most of the items that are down at the bottom of the hill are large items that had enough inertia, to roll to get that far down the hill. And I don't envision the removal of the items at the bottom of the hill would produce much sedimentation at all. And so speaking just for myself, I don't share your concern about downstream sedimentation for removal of stuff that's, in the stream. But I do, share your concern about, we're going to be taking stuff off at a steep slope. And so we need some erosion protection, just short of the stream.
Yeah, Bob, I do have, okay.
Oh, go ahead, Jack, go ahead.
I do have some pictures and I'll go back and take a look at them and see if your observation was correct. Is correct. I'm just assuming that in terms of this normal creep that goes on, the freezing and thawing and the creeping downhill, and that you're going to get some sort of a slump at the bottom. And I just didn't know how much was going to be right at that base. So let me go back and take a look at the pictures I took, and I'll send them over to you folks and do what you want with them.
And I'm going to now go back to Heather before I call on Mike.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment, like, in the NOI in the narrative again under D3, Mark identifies that no work would be done within the channel of the river. So that, as well as I believe any planned work would be in a period of time where there'd be minimal impact to any of the riverfront area.
Yeah, you certainly could choose a time of the year when there isn't a lot of flow down there. I'm going to call now on Mike LaRouche.
Yes, I'm just wanted to find out whether there will be any soil testing after or during this process. You mentioned there's some tanks that are buried. Who knows what might be left over in those tanks? Just want to throw that out there to see if any seepage has occurred. Do we want to be proactive and test whatever may have seeped into the soils? Is there any plan for that kind of testing?
So precursor to the filing of this, we had initiated an environmental site assessment to determine if there was any hazardous waste, and that was determined by the environmental consultant that there didn't appear to be any by the materials that were there.
All right, I can see that, but once you start in on a project like this, depending how deep some items might be, we may not even be able to determine, or you think you can determine based on what you've may have surveyed, that you may uncover something that you have not seen previously. That's my only concern.
Mike, if I may.
Yes.
Okay, so in reviewing my review of the site, I did review the original environmental analysis when it came out. That was quite some time ago. I agree with Mr. Popham's conclusions. The material down there, though, it sounds a little more ominous on paper than it actually is. Material down there is just essentially solid non-biological waste. It doesn't present any real hazard. It's the material shouldn't be in there, but the majority of it is fairly innocuous. So, you know, once an order is approved, I'd probably just add a condition that if any type of fluid release is noted, it would be tested. I mean, that's a requirement under state law anyway, but we could simply add that to the order as a condition for emphasis.
All right, Matt, I think that's a reasonable thing to add in on there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
The
you,
other
Matt.
thing I wanted to touch on really quick was the DEP comments. For some reason, DEP is asking the riverfront be noted on the plans. Now, I mean, the site basically is within the 100-foot buffer zone. I suppose you could do a blow up of it, but in looking at the high water mark and looking at where that BVW is, the high water mark and the edge of BVW would pretty much come close to matching. So he could clarify that 100-foot buffer zone line to put it as an inner riparian zone line at the same time. And that may address Kim Roth's comments on that. Based on the way she commented on the website, she seemed pretty adamant about it. And about the erosion control as well.
Thanks,
And it
Matt.
looks like there are just a couple of things that she wanted cleared on the, you know, on what some of his notes meant. As far as, like, you know, he puts typical flag location. Again, I think that note is just an innocuous reference. It's more of a surveyor's reference. And I just think in Kim's mind, it probably clouded that up, and she probably wants something a little bit clearer on the plan to ensure that those flags are located. I don't think that'll be a problem for Mark to do that.
So Matt, are you thinking that we need Mark Popham to take and submit an amended plan to meet the DEP's remarks?
Yeah, I wouldn't term it as amended. I would term it as revised, because I don't see him changing the scope of work on here.
Okay,
The scope of work, I mean, the slope is steep, and I can understand some of the concerns, but the work is actually pretty straightforward. Shouldn't, you know, with the right contractor, shouldn't take too long to complete. But yeah, just, you know, you really want to add the clarifications. My only concern with that is considering the, you know, I've known Kim for a while. And when I looked at the comments on it, she's emphasizing a lot of different things. And she even goes as far to say, you know, if the commission closes on this meeting, it should require an amendment to the order for this stuff. So rather than sit here and have to do the procedure twice, because she may turn around and intervene, let's just get the notes clarified on there. We can resubmit the revised plan to DEP for her to look at, and then move on from there.
so
I mean,
that
her notes sound a lot. Her notes, when you actually read into her notes, a lot of it is mostly documentation changes, and they should be pretty easy to do. You know, but she's emphatic about the documentation changes. So I think
So
that
that certainly sounds like we're going to be doing a continuance at the end of this, at the end of this tonight. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Any comments or questions from members of the public?
Mr. Chair.
Jack, sorry, Rich.
No problem. I guess I have a hard time without clarifying the erosion protection, at least at the edge of the wetland. I don't know why we would want to wait for a contractor to be hired for that to be determined as a minimum standard.
And I don't either. I'm just telling you what Popham said in his response.
Yeah. Myself, I would think that if he has to clarify the riverfront and wetland border, there's no reason he can't at least put a minimum standard erosion protection along the edge of the wetland, because it looks like we're working right up to the edge of the wetland. They definitely-
At least, there's gonna be some things they're gonna have to reach into the wetland and take them out.
Yeah, but at least we'll have a demarcation of where the wetland is and was when the
Yeah.
work's being done. And then we can always add to the erosion protection as we see fit or is needed, working with the contractor once the contractor's been hired.
I was gonna say, our general boilerplate does allow us the flexibility to adjust the erosion control as necessary. So I think if he puts on a basic erosion control plan, and if it needs to be adjusted in the field, that could be done. I mean, the order does allow us that option.
But Matt, we are gonna need you to take and reach out to Mark Popham and tell him he's got to make these adjustments, so we can get a satisfactory response from the DEP, at least in my opinion. Maybe other members have a different opinion, but it seems to me that that would be a prudent way to go here.
Yeah, I'll work it out with Mark, go over the comments with him and get the appropriate changes made. It doesn't look like there's anything, pardon the pun, earth shattering here that couldn't be taken care of.
And maybe we could get them to actually attend the next meeting.
Okay. The interesting thing, and the reason why I'm emphasizing the comments is if you actually look at her comments, she made initial comments, he revised, she adjusted her comments based on his revision, and it almost looks like she doubled down on her original comments.
So she wasn't happy with his revisions. That's that's what I hear you saying, you're interpreting it as.
Yeah, I guess that would be the long and the short of it, sure.
So I'm looking for a motion. Matt, you think we should continue this for 2 meetings, 1 meeting?
I think 2 weeks should be enough.
2 weeks. So I'm looking for a motion to continue into our next meeting, which I believe is on the 16th.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
roll call vote, Rich Birsch,
Aye.
Jeff Viviano,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
and I for myself. So Heather, unfortunately, it's going to be continued, and hopefully we can get Mark Popham to make those changes and submit it to the DEP, and we can get this behind us at our next meeting.
Okay, so if he's not able to make those changes prior to the 16th, to be
We probably
submitted
just
to
didn't continue to our first
continue it
meeting.
in March.
In March,
Yeah.
March 2nd.
Okay. All right.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do not. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night.
Continued public hearings. The Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on the notice of intent by Paul Goslin for the relocation of an existing drain line at 21 Brookview Terrace. Is there anyone here for that? It says Chef G. You're muted.
Oh, you gotta unmute yourself, buddy. Yeah, Bob, that was the problem I was having with my computer earlier. All of a sudden I saw lips moving and no sound. That's why I had to reboot.
It's my school computer, that's why.
Okay. If I recall correctly, at the last, when this hearing, there were no questions, or the questions were all answered. We are waiting for a DEP file number, which has been issued with no comments. That's my little introductory summary. Do any of the members have any additional questions or comments? Do any members of the public have any additional questions or comments? If there are no additional questions or comments, I'm looking for a motion to approve this notice of intent.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Roll call vote. Rich,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Mike,
aye.
Jack,
Hi.
and I for myself. You're all set, Paul.
All right. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
All right. The Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on a notice of intent by Eric Fowler for the development of a 4-lot residential subdivision at 711 Mass Ave. This must be Wesley.
Good evening. Wesley
Good evening,
Fliss,
Wesley.
Bingham Associates. With me this evening is Eric Fowler, who's the applicant on the project.
Good evening.
So at the last meeting, the one outstanding item that I had on my list was the more questions about the alternatives analysis and some question about the economic viability of some smaller options or less units options. And so I had a chance to speak with the applicant, and that's why he's here tonight also. But it's similar to what we had talked about at the last meeting that I talked with the commission about, was that when we were looking at some of the different options with less units, be it 6 units maybe versus the 8 units, we looked at site costs not really reducing drastically, and percentage of profitability of a product between 6 and 8 became something that wasn't really viable for the applicant. But I know the commission, I think probably would maybe have a couple questions maybe for the applicant more than myself to go over that item if more detail if you want. But that was the biggest reason why the development was chose for this size. Looking at land acquisition costs and also land development costs, like I said, to also make it profitable. And when I know dealing with a number of these projects, when they look to get these financed by a bank, they have to be at a certain profitability before a bank would even entertain, borrowing money to do a product of this size or anything like, even if it was 6 units or 8 units on this project site. So I don't know if the commission members have any questions for Mr. Fowler with regards to that. I know, I believe it was Richard that had brought up the question at the last meeting. So I don't know, Richard, if you have any questions for Eric.
No, I was actually kind of looking for a written report on that, Wesley. I mean, you said it yourself that you got to go to a bank. So obviously you must have to produce something for a bank with some numbers on it, acquisition cost, development costs, sales, things like that. I mean, it shouldn't have been that hard to produce some sort of an analysis between 6 units and 8 units, or 2 3-unit buildings, or 2 4-unit buildings, or some other alternative to what you presented to us. I mean, it's kind of hard to review something that's not in writing.
And can I share my screen? I do have a financial analysis in front of me.
Unfortunately, it's something I need to look at myself. I'm not prepared to just look at it tonight, and I have no opportunity to review it myself.
What criteria, if you could help me provide if you could provide me a little bit of guidance, what specifically kind of financial data is a Conservation Commission looking for in a project?
I would think your engineer should be able to provide some basis for an alternatives analysis that the DEP had commented in their review of this project.
Well, the civil engineer would have information around site cost, but won't necessarily have building cost. The project encompasses a lot more than just land. And given the cost of land, the development cost, all the inflation that we're experiencing with building materials and just household items, we all suffer from that or impacted by that today. We know that inflation is a real thing. There's talk about interest rates going up in the near term. The Fed keeps hinting at interest rates rising. And so, there's a number of variables or factors that go into an entire development like this. And, the long and short of it is we don't actually make a profit until the 8th unit is sold. There's all all the cost is paid for through the sale of the first 7 units. We don't realize a profit on this until the 8th unit. And so with that kind of an impact, if we can't do the 8 units as a non-starter, there's simply not enough room in the development beyond these, the project as it's currently planned to do, to make a significant change. Going from 6 to 8 units is a 25% reduction in the available units. I mean, these townhouses that we'd be selling, that's a significant impact. So I'm just trying to understand. I have a rolled up summary I'm willing to share in a spreadsheet, but my concern and my fear is you start looking at this rolled up analysis, which provides a there's sort of numbers behind the numbers, if you will. How much detail am I expected to provide a conservation commission for approval on this project? I just want to understand, is this going to answer the question if I provide, because this has already been delayed once. We're now asking, come back to this meeting and answer the questions. And now, given the posturing, we may have to come back again with a spreadsheet. And then yet again, there might be more detailed questions behind it. So I just don't know where it ends. Like, how do we get to a conclusion on this?
I do have one question, if I may. Bob?
Go ahead.
Mr. Fowler,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
just curious, what would happen to your infrastructure costs if you reduce the units, say, from 8 to 6?
The infrastructure
85.
cost, doesn't change by much, a few percent, because the amount of development that's going on for 6 or 8 units is roughly the same. I mean, we'll have one less foundation, obviously, because these are 4 duplexes. We won't have to run the sewer and the water pipe to that additional duplex. So there is a reduction in some cost, but to put in the appropriate drainage, the blacktop, all the piping and infrastructure to tie into the road, the fire hydrant that's required. I mean, there's good 95% of the development costs that's still realized. Whether we could, 6 units or 8 units, it's significant.
And Matt, if
So
I could
what you're
just-
telling me is that even with a reduction in units, the majority portion of the costs of the infrastructure would not change as a result at all.
Right.
So the roadway costs would still be the same. Stormwater management costs would still be the same. The
Correct.
development footprint of the roadway would still be the same
Correct.
because it's a subdivision. Is that why?
No, if I could, Eric, I'm going to step in here on this one. So Matt, if you look at the way it's set up, we would literally lose, I think, 4 parking spaces, but the majority of that driveway is not changing. So the driveway into the site services the other 3 duplexes. And so that won't change. We can't shrink that down. The stormwater system, the majority of that size is, dictated by, it's not going to really change drastically because it's still going to have the 3 other duplexes. The pavement area doesn't really change drastically. Removing 4 parking spaces isn't a huge decrease in impervious surface. And so looking at the drainage, the only thing that may do is shrink the height of the basin, but it's not going to really shrink the footprint of the stormwater basin. So as Eric touched on, the majority of the big items of the site work don't change between 6 and 8. And Richard, if I could touch, I think Richard, you asked if why can't we do I guess quads or different kind of building layouts. The zoning doesn't allow us to do anything other than duplexes. And so one of the original layouts that we looked at on this property was to try to do quads on this to limit the disturbance on the site, but the town zoning does not allow anything different than the duplexes, because that's how the townhouse definition is. And so that's something that came about when we were dealing with the ZBA and the planning board. And so we did look at other options, similar, obviously unit numbers, but different orientations of the site. And because we had to do duplexes per the zoning, we couldn't get away from doing what we're showing there.
And you didn't explore going to the ZBA? Because I know there's a 3-family down the street that went to ZBA and got approved.
No, we actually do. We were in front of the ZBA.
And they
We had to go in front of the ZBA first to
variance
get the
for 3.
use. So the use had to get approved by the ZBA, and then the planning board wouldn't approve any other layout because it's not allowed.
Okay.
And so the initial plan we
There
submitted to
wasn't
the planning board
approved
actually
3-family
showed.
just down the street, so I'm not sure. I didn't. take the zoning
Yeah, and that's, I'm just kind of telling you that the process we went through with the ZBA and then to the planning board, and the planning board basically told us we couldn't do duplexes. I mean, not quads, sorry. Because that was our intent, was to do quads to shrink the footprint. But that wasn't something they were going to entertain. So the plan that was in front of you was kind of been, it's not the first iteration of what we've been doing on this site.
Anything else, Richard?
Nope, not at this point. I'm still waiting for a written alternatives analysis for us to review at this point. I mean, it is the headwaters of the Catacoonamug Brook. We just sat down and had an hour meeting trying to review on Lake Shirley and trying to keep that as viable of a lake as possible. It is a level 5 impounded lake. And this is the headwaters for that lake. So we want to try to keep the brook as pristine as it is today without further adding pollutants into it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Jack Rabbit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But it's very clear that even in the DEP, they said work in the riverfront area requires an adequate and alternatives analysis. So there's no requirement that says that we have to make sure you make money or enough much money as you want. And all we're looking for is to make sure you comply with everything that the town has determined. And could you put a single family home in that property?
By zoning, you can, yeah.
Yeah, and so we're looking for alternatives that say you're going to do okay and you're going to meet our requirements. And we haven't seen it yet. And I'm hoping you get a chance to play with it. Rethink the concept of I need a duplex.
I missed that last comment. What was that again, Jack?
I'm just thinking maybe we ought to rethink the concept of I need a duplex. Why not a couple single family homes? You can build some really big ones. That's what I'm throwing it out. I'm saying is find a way of meeting our requirements and make that the basis for your alternative analysis.
I'm sorry, Jack. Were you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll let it fly.
Thank you. I would just say that to me, we're talking about alternatives analysis here because the DEP requested them under the in their comments and because it's in the riverfront area. But in my view, that's the only reason we're doing it. It's not the commission's, in my view, our role is to take and consider the application that's before us and not say, oh, we wish we had a different application or you should do this differently. We should take a look at the application that's before us, see does it meet the criteria of the Inland Wetlands Act and the Rivers Act. And if it does, pass it. And if it doesn't, modify it so it does, help the applicant, to modify it so it does, not say, oh, you should have applied for something different. But that's my personal view.
Bob, I appreciate your view. And so I do have to ask the question to the Conservation Commission, do I really need to do an alternatives analysis to present single family homes as an alternative to duplexes on this site when we've gone through all the work and spent all the money we have to date to provide this application? Do we or do we not meet the protection acts that are before the Conservation Commission?
And before I answer, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go back to Richard Birch. But I would say, I thought I recalled seeing in the DEP comments, the DEP saying, but I could be confused, saying, you didn't just consider, three quads as opposed to three duplexes as opposed to four. But maybe that was actually in the discussion. I'm not sure. But right now we're going to go back to Richard. Where'd he go? Well, there he is. Rich, you had your hand up, I thought.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Conservation Commission is charged with the overseeing and enforcing the wetland regulations that DEP has put forth. The comments that DEP put forth were not opinions of DEP. They do cite regulations that require an alternatives analysis. The alternatives analysis has not been presented to us for review. Therefore, this application is not, in my opinion, in compliance with DEP wetland regulations. And they are stated in their review of this application.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
All right, wait.
respond.
But before you say anything, Wesley, I just want to say to Richard, point well made. Now we'll go to Wesley.
Sure. So we did put an alternatives analysis in there. DEP's comments asked for additional alternatives. So I'd have to disagree with Mr. Birch's point there that we didn't actually put an alternatives analysis to this. Now, I guess back to Mr. Fowler's question, Richard, and I don't want to get into an argument here. We want to just clarify what the commissioner or really yourself needs is DEP's comment asked, why aren't we doing 6 units instead of 8 units? And our response is that it's not economically viable to do 6 instead of 8. And so really the question needs to be asked again is, what kind of economic backing or what kind of report do you need to show the numbers that, and obviously I know, I think the problem the applicant is having with this is that he doesn't want to, not that he's divulging trade secrets or whatever the case is, but, when you start talking finances, then obviously you get to, some personal information with regards to, how they look at, economic viability of projects. So I don't, I think that's the, some of the hesitation behind the applicant here is that, we want to make sure we give you enough information that, you feel comfortable that, we're not trying to, I don't want to say pull a fast one on you, but, when the numbers are looked at, they're actually looked at. And I know Mr. Rabbit asked, why aren't we doing 4 single family homes out here instead of the, the duplexes the way they set up, and that's becomes a zoning issue. And I could take a look at some of the documentation that we've already done on this piece of property in years past that we tried looking at that, first item before even, the Mr. Fowler got involved with this property because we had done some work, with a previous landowner, thinking the same thing, that why can't they do single family homes on here? But, the zoning didn't work out for it. And so that's where kind of where you get to the townhouse option, where you have a common driveway and that services all the units. And as Mr. Fowler said, we've gotten to this point because we've been working with the ZBA and the planning board, and we kind of got to this item where there's townhouses, it's duplexes, because that's what's allowed by zoning. And now I guess, and that goes back to my question though, Richard, is what economic or what numbers do you need to see from Mr. Fowler? Because it's not going to be real. I mean, I know you're asking me for it, but I don't know those numbers. I don't know those answers either,
Present the
because I'm not.
with an analysis that you think supports your case, that 6 units or 7 units or what other alternatives analysis you've developed for this parcel are not financially viable. I mean, it is a preponderance of the evidence that you present. So it's up to you to present as much evidence as you feel you can present to show to us that this is the only viable development on this property.
Eric, is that enough?
Well, to answer that question, I think it's got to go back to some of the comments you were making earlier, Wes, about the viability of the project back before I was even involved with this particular piece of land. I mean, it's, you're comparing duplexes
so, Eric,
to, we got to duplexes for a reason.
Yeah,
right?
before you get ahead of yourself, Eric, though, so Richard, if we show you the numbers between the three and four duplexes, I guess the question is how detailed, I mean, you don't want to see, what it costs per square foot of each building, is that where, I mean, how do you want to, you're gonna leave that up to us? I mean, how,
Yeah, I would rather leave it up to you because other members may have
okay,
other criteria that they use for developing an opinion of financial viability.
okay.
I mean, I'm
That's
not
the
going
way,
to put out a standard for you.
yeah.
just gonna-
I
I'm
guess
gonna
that's
allow
the
you
way
to-
I'm looking at this is, I'm trying to answer DEP's question, and DEP's question is why can't we eliminate one duplex?
Yep.
And so,
I mean,
and that's why I want to stick to the fact
shouldn't
that,
be that big of a deal to write down, your land acquisition costs, your development costs,
okay,
your building costs, your carrying costs. I mean, there's not that, it doesn't take that much information to just show, yes, this is a viable, or no, this is not a viable.
Are you good
If we
with that,
stay within,
Wesley?
if we stay within that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Eric.
I was just say, if we stay within the criteria that was just voiced, I'm not sure who that was.
No,
talking
I
about
would not stay
infrastructure
within,
costs.
I'm just offering an opinion. It is your responsibility to provide information within a preponderance of the evidence to prove to us that the project is viable only as presented before us. So I'm not going to give you any criteria or any outline to follow. You need to provide the evidence that you feel proves your case.
I hear and understand what you're saying. My concern is we don't get to an end game by the next meeting. This is just gonna continue. We're gonna kick the can down the road because there's gonna be more questions.
Yeah, I mean, how many meetings have we had? One? And then we
At the
asked for
Conservation
alternatives
Commission meeting,
analysis,
this is
which
the
was not
second, this is
presented
the
to
second
us,
one.
so-
But
Yeah,
we're-
but I was pretty specific in asking for an alternatives analysis at the last one, so you didn't
Yeah.
present it, so we'll have to move, at this point, in my opinion, is to move forward until such time as we get one. But that's in your court, not ours.
Okay, let's start addressing our comments to the chair, and let's go to Mr. Rabbit.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Isn't this I'm addressing you, Mr. Chairman, isn't this a classic we have in that someone owns a piece of property and they want to put something on that piece of property that violates our wetland protections? And regardless of if you come up with an economically viable solution, it still has to meet our requirements specific to the wetlands protection. And that's perhaps the starting point. The other end of the scale is what would you have to put down there to make it economically viable that could meet our requirements? And that's what I deem a reasonable analysis.
Okay,
So with that, I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question?
Wesley, before you go on, I'd just like to summarize where I see us set. When we went through this at the last meeting, the only questions that came up, as far that I remember, and I'm wide open to be corrected by other members, was this issue of the alternatives analysis. There was really no questions about the site plan, erosion controls, the usual things, that we usually end up talking about. And the only question was this alternatives analysis. And so to Mr. Fowler, in his, concerns that, well, if I give you your alternatives analysis, well, what's next? As far as I can see, there isn't anything else that's next. That's the only open question that's been brought up, in two opportunities, for the commissioners to look at the plans and comment on it. So, and I support, Rich's request, for some kind of alternatives analysis, that would address the 3 versus 4. I don't think it would be that hard to show, I'm not going to make a profit on 3 quads. but I will make a profit on 4. About 3 duplexes versus 4 duplexes. But that's what I had to say. I'm sorry. I've been speaking. I don't usually like to do that until everyone else is done. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners or from the applicant?
Yep, I just
Go ahead, Wesley.
want to clarify or ask a question for Mr. Rabbit, because I want to make sure that I'm not missing something. Mr. Rabbit made a comment that we're in violation of regulation, and
I did not, I don't really know at this point what 3 is going to look like. All I'm saying is that if you decide to come in 3 and you can make some money, as long as you're not violating any requirements, you'll have my vote. And that's all I'm really saying. And that's why I threw up, what can you do something that's going to be economically good for you? And in another form of configuration.
no.
You know,
So you keep saying we're in violation. We're not in violation of anything, though.
I haven't.
We're
seen
in
it.
less.
I
We're in
haven't
less than
seen-
10% disturbance within the riverfront, so we're not in violation of any of the regulations.
Yeah, I haven't seen the drawings, to be truthful. I haven't seen your economic analysis that says it can't be compressed or can't be reduced. That's all I'm saying. And if you are currently, as you stated, within that, then I would support that. I have
Well,
no.
and I just want to make sure that I'm not missing something, because you're saying we're in violation of something, and the current
Well,
proposal
if-
doesn't
if
violate.
whatever you come up with, right? And you're saying I can make that work in your, your analysis.
Yep.
And if, as long as it's meeting the riverfront requirements, yeah.
Okay, and I just want to make sure, because you keep saying violation. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
I'm just saying
Because-
if you were to, and I don't know what the status of your new drawing will look like or your
Well,
analysis look like.
we're not intending to change the drawing. The only thing we're going to provide you is the financial backing to show item, and it shows right here. It says right in the Wetlands Protection Act, the 4 factors to be considered when you're looking at alternatives analysis. Cost is number 1.
Mhm.
Cost.
Yeah.
And so that's why I just want to make sure that we give you enough information that make sure that you guys understand that the applicant is looking at cost as being his number 1 item, as the reason why he wants the 4 duplexes instead of 3. So,
Right.
and that's fine. And I think, to be honest with you, I think I have a clear direction, at least regards to that. And we can have the conversations in the next meeting if we want to have conversations about. But really, I know at the last meeting, I thought we had a clear, and I think we still have a clear direction in regards to what the alternatives
Okay.
analysis has to be. And it has to be, let's show you the numbers behind 6 units and 8 units. And hopefully we can show you that information and put that item to bed.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you. Richard Bursch.
Chair, thank you. I would just ask through you to the applicant that they present this information prior to the next meeting so it can be reviewed by members. That way there, if there are still questions outstanding, hopefully they can be addressed prior to the next meeting. Thank you.
Understandable.
Yeah, so, if we could get it, so that it, to Matt, well in advance of the next meeting, so he can send that out to members, and if members have questions, they can, send them back to Matt, and he can send them off, to you, so that, they could be addressed at the next meeting. So at the next meeting, we could, as chair, it's always my goal, to decide on an application, as expeditiously as possible, while still, making sure we do a thorough job. So, I don't want any needless delays, that's all. Anything else? Jeff?
I guess I just have a question. If it's not financially viable to do 6 units, why are we even asking, or why are we even requiring them to do an alternative analysis? Why don't we just, I'm comfortable making a motion right now. Why don't we just take a vote?
Well, Jeff, and the DEP asked for the three versus 6. And I do think Rich is being reasonable and saying, I'd like to see some documentation about 3 versus 6. We haven't seen any documentation other than a statement about it's not economically viable. And so I would just appreciate, patience for one more meeting, Jeff.
Okay.
so we could have, I like to get unanimous votes when we can. So we're all the commissioners, feel comfortable with the application, and that's I'm trying to get to that point.
Well, it just seems like sometimes we're just trying to appease one or two members, and it's just not going to be a 7-vote unanimous decision at some time. So we just need to take it to a vote.
I agree with you. Let's do a straw poll. Jeff, you sound like you're ready to vote tonight.
I'm ready to vote tonight.
Mike, are you ready to vote tonight?
No, I'd like to wait for that alternative report, as Rich has suggested. I think that's a good idea. And it also follows the DEP's request.
Katie, are you ready to vote tonight?
I am not ready to vote tonight for the same reasons as Mike.
And so, Jeff, that's why we're going to wait until the next meeting.
Well, what I'm saying is it's not financially viable in their eyes. So they're not going to do this development if it's not financially viable, obviously. So if we deny this, they can just reapply with something that is a little sized down, and then we can just move on.
I would hope we could work a consensus approach where we could address all the questions, all the commissioners' questions, and the applicant can get what they're after. The commission can feel comfortable, with the application, and and we've had a good process, and that's what I'm trying to achieve here.
Okay.
I'm looking for a motion to continue until the 16th.
I'll move.
Second.
Roll call vote. Rich.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Pat. Katie.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Jack.
Aye.
And aye for myself. Thank you, Wesley and Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next meeting.
All righty. The Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on a notice of intent by Bill Emke for work at 445 Townsend Harbor Road for the replacement of railroad tie steps and timber retaining wall within the buffer zone. Matt, where are we with having the DEP be aware of their payment?
Still waiting for the DEP. I'll talk to Judy Schmidt tomorrow, find out what's going on.
Did we straighten out the payment issue where they said they never received payment, and Bill was going to send in, a new check?
As far as I know, Bill sent in a new check. I'm just waiting. They're probably just waiting for it to clear. So, go ahead.
Do we know if Bill has a copy of his check?
That I don't know. I'd have to talk to Bill.
All right, well, let's see if we can't find out. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over.
Yeah, you skipped over Gabe's place.
Yes, and Fran is sitting there. Well, anyway, let's continue. I'm looking for a motion to continue Mr. Emke's.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call. Rich.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Katie.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was still muted. Aye.
All right, Mike.
Aye.
Jack.
Aye.
And I for myself, and I apologize to Fran. I'm sorry I skipped over you, and we'll come back to you. The Conservation Commission will hold a public meeting on a request for determination by Paolo Majowski for work at 2 Gabe's Place for the removal of trees within the buffer zone. So Fran, how about if you unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hi. Matt, where are we with this application? Did we get a revised plan?
Bob, if you look on the cloud, there's a revised plan sitting there.
All right. Have commissioners had the opportunity to look at this revised plan? Revised. Aha. Let's see. All right, so let's scale this down to 75%. Let's take and rotate it counterclockwise 90 degrees. And let's share the screen.
And I believe above it, there's just a summary.
Okay.
If you scroll up.
All right,
Oops,
let me.
upside down. Sorry.
No, that's my fault. I'll rotate just this page. And we'll rotate it by 180 degrees. Description of work to be completed. All previous tree removals and stump debris to be removed from wetlands area. Stumps inside 30 feet of wetlands to be ground or cut flush with ground level. No stump pulling. 5 by 5 by 2 feet granite markers buried will protrude 6 inches above grade, or 2 feet minimum diameter boulders, or at least every 30 feet be placed 30 feet from wetlands for demarcation. 12 pin oaks are similar, 2-inch diameter, 10 feet height to be planted as specified in plan. Loam and seed from house up to 30 feet, no disturb area. No changes to grade will be made. Signed and dated.
And the plans underneath show the 30-foot no-touch zone and the area to be planted.
Any comments or
30,
questions
30,
from
50.
commissioners?
And 100.
Jack Rabbit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this drawn to scale? Is this map drawn to scale?
I believe it's a direct copy of the plan that they submitted, which was to scale.
Was the scale, Jeff? Yeah, I'm just looking at the markers, and that was saying that I guess it's every 30 feet or so. And I'm assuming those little squares, the diamonds, are 30 feet. And I'm just looking at the 30-foot line to the wetland, and it seems like it's a bit, they're closer than 30 feet. That's all. And is that the intent to put them specifically right there?
Wow, but the narrative above says that the granite markers would be every 30 feet in place 30 feet from the wetlands.
Yeah.
And
they are 30 feet from the wetlands, but I don't know how close they are to each other.
Well, it looks to me like if they are 30 feet from the wetlands, then they are a little closer than 30 feet to each other, Jack.
Right. That's what I'm asking. And so it's
you're
intent to,
complaining that, so Jack, are you complaining they're gonna put too many markers?
God forbid, no. No, I'm just asking, is it going to be 30 feet, and therefore where they've got the markers placed wouldn't necessarily be where they're going to end up in real life if they are 30 feet. So I just a question that, which brings a whole big question, is this to scale? And I'm assuming that the trees are sitting on either side of it, and they're roughly close to the marker. So the question bears the question, is it to scale? Is this actual locations that are generated there?
And I personally am happy with Jeff's answer that it was copied from a scaled drawing. So
yeah, I just don't I didn't see a scale.
And there is no scale on it, but
right. I mean, it's a simple answer. Yeah, they're going to be 30 feet, and that those may not be accurately reflected on that drawing, which, okay.
Anything else, Jack?
No, I'm happy that they're pulling the stumps outside of the 30 feet, and then they're grinding the rest inside, and they're cleaning up the brush and things like that. Is there, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Anything else, Jack?
Nope, I'll take my hand down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? And any comments or questions from the public? then I'm looking for a motion for, this is a request for determination for a negative determination.
So moved.
Oh, my God.
Comment, Mr. Chair?
Okay, we have,
Negative is a good thing, Fran.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? If there's
Go
no
ahead.
further discussion, I'm going to do a roll
Okay,
call.
Mr. Chairman, where this was originally identified as a violation without permit, and we've now come back and caused a remediation, would that fall out of the category of a negative determination? There is a positive, there is an impact on this area. So can it be a negative determination?
I don't see any reason why it couldn't be a negative determination. They're glued to a scope of work and it resolves the issue. I mean, technically DEP would like these issues to be resolved under enforcement without filing an NOI or an RDA.
Right.
If they came down and intervened, they'd probably scold us for doing this. Personally, I think this is the way to go. And I think it's fine as is. They paid attention to the detail. They've agreed to do a lot of the remedial work the commission has asked for. The wetland is intact and is in good condition. And I actually think the overstory that they're looking to plant as it matures is actually going to wind up being a better scenario than what's out there. So I don't see any impacts to wetlands on this. The impacts were in the buffer zone. They're mitigating this with the determination. So
Okay, so in the future, if, Mr. Chairman, if we have a violation, we can then move it in and treat it as a negative impact?
Jack, I think you're talking in circles.
Okay.
That's a
I'm
that's a
more than willing to
general.
go for it. Let's not do this to Fran, but this is a question. This is a question.
It's
in my mind.
Jack, it's a site by site basis. I mean, that depends on the nature of the violation.
Right.
So I think they mitigated this sufficiently. I don't have an issue with the way they did it. I think they did a good job.
I would vote for it, but I think there's a technical question we need to get past. But I don't want to do this to Fran. So, and Fran waited for us, so she's very nice. I'm okay with it. Thank you.
So I think I was looking for I think we had, if I recall correctly, we had a motion and a second. And I said, was there further discussion? And Jack
did a big circle on you. Yeah. Okay.
Had a kerfluffle. So we're going to go back now to the roll call vote. Rich.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Katie.
Aye.
Mike. Mike LaRouche.
Mike, you're
I'm
muted.
Mike's
Sorry, aye. Thank you.
Jack.
Aye.
And I for myself. So Fran, a negative determination means you did not negatively impact the wetlands, and or actually you will have not negatively impacted the wetlands after you've executed this plan. And so that's a good thing, and you're done.
Okay, thank God. All right.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fran.
Have a good night.
The Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on a notice of intent by Zachary Taylor for the construction of a new duplex home, septic and related site grading at 123 Chase Road. Matt, are we going to continue this? And if so, for
Yeah,
how
they
long?
should be the last continuance. They actually may wind up withdrawing because Chris McKenzie told me he's evaluating an alternative that might wind up pulling the entire proposal out of the buffer zone period.
So are we still
So
going
this
to
would be it.
continue it? Or are we,
Yep.
are we just going to close it?
No, continue it because he wants the time to finish his alternative exploration to see if he can do it and pull it out of the buffer zone. If he can't, he's going to come back to us and present.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to continue this until February 16th.
So moved.
Second.
Second,
All right, roll call. Rich,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Mike,
aye.
Jack,
Aye.
and I for myself. New business, old business, update on issues at 192 Townsend Harbor Road. What's this note here, Matt? It says remaining materials to be removed at break of weather per homeowner.
That's what he's proposing.
Okay, and so where this stands is Adam Costa sent me 5 draft letters with some questions that I want to discuss with him first before we send the letters out. And so that's where we're at. And I think we should send the letters out before we start, you know, this from the attorney before we start discussing things with the homeowners. Update on maintenance work at Hollis Road residence. It turns out Mike LaRouche and I went out there. How long ago was that, Mike? Back in November, right?
November is a good, yeah.
Was back in November. And did a site visit and identified a bunch of things. And after that, I wrote a long email to the assistant town manager and spoke with Matt, spoke with Adam. Matt's had the septic tank pumped. The plumbing, the toilets still don't flush right. One toilet doesn't flush at all, and the other toilet, it's reported, needs to be plunged after every use. And so Matt and Adam are gonna reach out to Rob Oliver to see, you know, does DPW have a plumber that we can use to address this health and safety issue? And I spoke with Heather Lemieux about can we avail ourselves of the services of Rob Oliver and his department to develop the specifications that our procurement laws seem to be telling us we need, you know, for this to either go out to bid or out for quotes. And she said yes. And so it's my understanding that Matt and Adam are going to be reaching out to Rob Oliver to take and you know, develop the specs we need for quotes. The other thing was we needed some rodent control work there and rodent remediation. And there was a problem with the the rodent control company trying to get a hold of the homeowner or the tenant. Turns out we were using an email for the tenant that she doesn't use very often. We have the new email, and so hopefully there's a school vacation coming up and the tenant works in the schools, and hopefully we can arrange to get a lot of this work done, you know, during that school vacation. At least that's the goal. Bylaw Review Committee.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick comment.
Go ahead, Jack.
I'm sorry. Okay, so you got a plug line, most likely, it sounds like it, and would it make sense to just call a Roto-Rooter guy in and have him do something, try something? And they can pretty quickly determine whether or not, you know, is it the D-box that's shifted and moved, or is it just some, you know, you get some roots in there? I mean, they can tell pretty quickly. And the thing is, then we can get the property online even faster than if we use the regular governmental piece. I would think not being able to flush your toilets are kind of a real big thing. And if we can do that real fast, I would think Roto-Rooter isn't going to cost you all that much either. And we'll get a decent firsthand assessment from the guys that do the work all the time.
And Jack, and I love your enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
For a quick solution. I've been trying to push the bureaucracy and the tenant on this now for a long time. I think just the idea that we can now avail ourselves, that Matt and Adam can avail themselves, of the expertise, and the resources of Rob Oliver to work this problem, I think are a big step forward.
Sure, he would do a good job. Just how fast can he do it? I'm just worried about the guy.
DPW may have the facilities to do it,
Yeah.
or be able to get the resources quickly.
I think speed is important here.
I'm also planning to have a talk with the tenant to tell her that she's got to be part of the solution, and she's got to, respond to communications and make reasonable efforts, to be available, so we can get these services accomplished. So
good.
I'm also planning to do that, and I hope no one thinks I'm overstepping by doing that, but I do plan to do that.
It is your property. It's our property, right? We're the landlords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bylaw Review Committee. Have people had a chance to look at our bylaws? That's a lot of NUE. I just remember two things that have come up over the bylaw. Since I've been on the commission for 5 years, 5.5 years now. I just remember two things that have come up about the bylaw. The one thing that came up was at one point the remark was made, why do people have to advertise for an RDA? And they said, oh, it's because it's in the bylaw. And I remember that remark, and someone said, well, maybe we ought to think about changing the bylaw. But that was a long time ago, and there were different commissioners then and everything else. The other remark about the bylaw was the bylaw specifically says that exemptions in the DEP do not apply to our bylaw. In the exemptions in the Inland Wetlands Act. And it's my personal opinion that they should not apply, but things that are exempted should be able to be considered under our local bylaw. But that's just what, I'm just one member, and that's my opinion. And I don't know if we need a workshop to discuss those things, or if no one else feels that way, we'll just move on to the next because it doesn't sound like anyone else has looked at the bylaw and said, oh, it needs revision. Matt Merle.
My recommendation would be to probably in the near future talk about scheduling a workshop for that particular issue. The reason being is with the way they're doing the exemptions nowadays, and based on the revised regulations, a lot of the exemptions would only apply if the work was done greater than 50 feet. Others basically would apply all the way up to the wetland. Some of those we already have exempted in our bylaw for roadway work. DPW, that's specifically exempted in the first provision of our bylaw. That work within existing roadways, we don't normally apply like certain no-touch zone provisions to those, as long as they're not expanded. But I think we should review the exemption requirements so that we can so that we're better able to figure out which ones we could more generally apply, especially those that are great, where the exemption from the state criteria doesn't happen until it's after 50 feet.
And just looking at the screen and thinking about who's on the commission now, I would think that there's a lot of people who would need to be educated about what the issues are here. Probably, I'm sure Jack and Rich have a good handle on what the issues are, but and I don't mean to slight anybody else, but so maybe we'll schedule a workshop for this at a future meeting when there's a lighter agenda.
I would second that motion, Mr. Chairman. You know.
Okay, wait. Let's hear what Mr. Bursch has to say.
Yeah, just a quick, the provision for excluding any of the DEP regulated by exemptions.
Yep.
A large part of that goes to the question of the 30-foot no-touch zone.
Yep.
So that took away, if we don't have that in the bylaw, that takes away from our abilities to completely enforce the 30-foot no-touch zone.
And Rich,
That
I'm
was
not,
back when the bylaw was.
and I understand that, Rich, and I am not advocating applying exemptions. What I'm advocating is that activities that people can apply for activities which are exempted under the, to do activities that are exempted in the, in the State Wetlands Act.
I mean, you could like enact policies regarding that, like that you could vote on based on the workshops. For example, a deck addition. You could approve a policy that if somebody comes up to us with a determination, say, for example, for a deck addition that's no greater than, say, 12 by 20, it would automatic the criteria for that, and it's greater than 50 feet. If it's a max of 12 by 20 and it's greater than 50 feet, it would tentatively meet the requirements for a negative determination as long as there's no other work proposed.
But again,
So you don't
that
want
would
somebody
go
coming
into
in.
the regulations. I don't think that you wouldn't put that burdensome of a requirement in the bylaw.
And
Right.
I'm not interested in discussing this tonight. I'm interested in having a workshop on this at a future time. And so if no one objects, I'd like to move on to enforcement.
Hey, Bob, maybe we can do it a Wednesday that we don't have a meeting or some other night.
Yep. That's when typically in the past we've done it. Sometimes when we have a month with three, 5 Wednesdays, we do it, on the
Okay.
5th Wednesday.
Sure, okay.
Violations, let's go straight to 441 Townsend Harbor Road.
Oh, I see Nick here.
Yep. Nick, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry about that. So from just going over last meeting, I thought tonight we were doing a field change to try to get us, I guess, one step, closer. The first thing would be to get the stop work order lifted. I'm going to be honest, we're not going to remove that roof until the new roof truss is in. It doesn't really make sense to open that whole foundation up to snow and ice and whatnot in the wintertime. I mean, the overhang is coming down either way. Everything is coming down, but we need to get out of the stop work order before anything's done.
So what I would recommend at this point is that, Nick, you, along with the sketches you showed me, you submit a phased narrative on what you're proposing for the work and how you're going to phase that in during the season. So that way you can take that stuff into account and the commission can review it. And if the commission's okay, if he submits that narrative to me, I'll throw it up as a field change for the next agenda. We've got a bit of a lighter agenda. I had 2 hearings come in, but they were a day too late. So they're not coming on until March 3rd. So,
Okay.
Or March 2nd, rather. So is that okay with the commission?
It's fine with the chair. And Nick, we generally like to have things in writing. And so, if you could take and submit a document to us, a signed document that says, this is what I plan to do. I plan to take off the existing roof, replace it, and remove the overhang and replace it with a different roof that doesn't overhang. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the violation here. And so if you commit to doing that, I would think that the commission, would see that favorably and we could get out from underneath this enforcement order. But first, I'm going to call on Mr. Rabbit because he has his hand raised and see what he has to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Hey, a couple things. First of all, Nick, I love the drawing of the house, and where it, if you're signing it and saying you're going to do it, I wouldn't have a problem at all lifting the work order. I mean, the cease and desist, stop work. The other part, Nick, are you going to be doing anything with that the front beach area? You had the retaining walls, and you were talking about doing something there. Are you going to do it during the drawdown, or?
That's another thing that I was talking to Jack from Dillis and Roy.
Yeah.
We weren't really sure if we were gonna now that this is I guess kind of put on hold for the time being. If we can look at that too in the same time, I mean, I guess if we can get that solved and obviously the house solved all at once instead of going back to it, I think it'd be a lot easier.
Yeah.
We do have some time between now and the next meeting.
I believe you have and once we approve, we get there. I believe you have up to 3 years to get that done. And I'm just interested, are we going to try and do it in the drawdown period, or we're going to miss that? I'm trying not to miss it this year for you. That's all.
I do know that there's one pine tree that's literally on top of the railroad tie, and it's kind of going towards the lake as it is. That would be required to be removed.
Mm-hmm. And you got that dead pine on if you're looking at the lake, it's on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
One you take down that too.
Yeah, that's just I don't know if Matt had got a chance to go down there and look at the other pine that's on the
Yeah, I haven't had the chance to do much. I actually had been out due to a family issue and just getting back in.
Yeah, Matt, I'll send you a picture. It's a no-brainer.
Okay. So why don't we just add that to the list? Have Jack Maloney contact me. I'll go over that with them so we can present it to the commission for its review at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, is there any way we can just decide to move ahead and lift the order? I know we need the building inspector to lift it, I believe. We can.
Well, he has a separate order, Jack, so that's up to him to do.
Oh, okay.
So my recommendation would be just to go ahead with the field change for the next meeting, get everything all straightened out. And if the commission's comfortable with everything that's on there and wants to approve it as is, we do it then. I'd rather not, on this instance, you guys don't usually like to have stuff that's approved without the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather make sure that, for our sake and Nick's sake, that we have the paperwork and everybody's of an understanding and that there's nothing left to interpretation.
Right. I just thought the drawing of the house was sufficient, but now we're looking for a timeline, and I have no problem waiting that.
Well, I mean, there are certain things that Nick wants to do now and certain things he doesn't because of winter considerations, which is understandable. I just think we should have that all in writing so that we understand exactly what he needs. And if it's satisfactory to the commission, we just implement it that way.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm sorry to my hand up.
So Nick, I think we're done for tonight. So if you can submit that to us for next time. Then we can do it as a field change and lift the enforcement order. Or lift the stop, or authorize Matt to lift the stop work order. Okay, Nick?
Yep.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Nick, Matt, can you take us through the other enforcement of the violation list?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Jack.
Sorry. I have to sign off a little early. I have a pretty early morning, so at this time I should probably start hitting the rack. So I guess I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks if that's okay.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, for your participation.
Hi, Jeff.
All right. Take care, guys. Yep.
Take care, Jeff.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Stay flying.
Yeah, weather's going to be good the next couple of days.
Okay, so 615 Townsend Street and 48 Oak Ridge. I have to go over it with the other town departments, for example, legal for 48 town, Oak Ridge, and building was 615 Townsend. I just haven't had the chance between the building inspector having COVID issues and then me having a family issue I had to take some time off for. So he and I are going to catch up on the stuff next week. And I should have a report for the commission by the next meeting. That also would include 23 Cove Road. 190 Peninsula, I don't know what direction you guys want me to go in because I'm not getting any responses.
Well, I think we need to take and send them a letter to the children who participated. Do we have their addresses?
Yeah, I do.
Send a letter to the children who participated saying we need a response or we're going to have to take and start doing progressive discipline. That's my opinion.
Okay, works for me.
Yeah.
Update on the trails grant. I sent out some PDFs to be converted into metal signs. The sign company is telling me that the PDFs don't have high enough resolution, so I'm trying to work through that issue. No extension permits. Oh, certificate of compliance, 30 Laurel
Yeah, can we
Lane.
hold off on those?
Yep.
I'll take them up at the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I'm sorry. Hey, the Val Burrows.
That's the 615 Townsend Street, Jack.
Yeah.
As I had stated, between Casey's COVID issues and the fact I had to take some time off to address a family issue,
Yeah.
I haven't had the chance to work with him on this yet. We're catching up on this next week, so I'll have a report at the next meeting.
Yeah, it's a violation of our wetland protection as well as our own requirements. Are you aware that they actually get a permit from the planning board for that site?
No, and that's one of the legal items that we're examining, and that's why I need Casey.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Committee reports. Administrators at determination, none. Open space trail land use issues, none. Any communications or public comment?
Yeah, Bob, I have a public comment. I'm gonna have to sign off in a couple of minutes, but I do have a public comment before I do.
Go ahead.
As you guys know, my retirement is scheduled for May 31st. The retirement board did contact me and said that, they should have voted on it by now, but I haven't seen the minutes. But I was basically told by the retirement board that my application will be approved. It was pretty much of a no-brainer. So, my retirement date is basically locked into the 31st of May. Bob, I know you and I have discussed updating personnel with Adam Burney. And they're looking to maybe get some administrative help in the office, maybe create a part-time position, which is really good. But what I really wanted to say was, I've been with this town for 23 years. And I couldn't have asked for more in my life. As I'm winding this part of my life down over the next couple of months, to say thank you to you guys is just not sufficient, because I've become better as a person and better as a professional and made so many friends because of Lunenburg. Rich has taught me so much about, just even handling one thing at a time, and about the support that you guys have all given me. And like I said, a thank you, just saying thank you isn't sufficient. So I want to let you guys know what I did was the sign for the Table Rock open space that the commission put up when it got the grant. The commission didn't pay for it. I did. It is a donation from me to the town of Lunenburg. It's my way of saying thank you for 23 amazing years. And it's probably the most demonstrative way I could show that you guys have meant so much to me. And I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
You'll be missed. Now you got us scared to death. What are we gonna do without you?
Any other public comment?
Oh, I do. I have one, Mr. Chairman. You're doing a great job on the trail stuff and all that other piece. I sincerely thank you. You're doing good stuff, Bob. You're really doing well.
Well, if you can catch, please try and catch on the public access channel, the lady who interviewed me, and she features a little piece about the trails on Cowdrey, Burroughs, Robs Hill, and Pleasant Street, Laurel Bank. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn
So
at
moved.
9:42.
Congratulations.
So moved.
Second,
All right, roll call. Rich,
All right.
Pat, Katie,
Aye.
Mike,
aye.
Jack,
Aye.
I for myself. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Night, guys.
See ya.